The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Guthrie, Oklahoma Territory, but Abigail Mills didn't flinch. At 22, she had grown accustomed to the sound of violence that accompanied the promise of civilization in 1889. Her father's general store stood as a testament to that promise, a wooden structure of commerce amid the chaos of a frontier town still finding its footing after the land run. The bell above the door jingled as she swept the porch, her eyes lifting to the horizon where trouble approached in the form of a lone rider. Vincent Blackburn rode into Guthrie with nothing but his reputation, a dwindling supply of ammunition, and wounds both visible and hidden. The blood seeping through his shirt told one story, the haunted look in his eyes told another. His horse, a sturdy Palomino gelding that had carried him across 3 territories, stumbled slightly as they approached the general store. Vincent knew he was running out of time and options. "Whoa there, Saul," he murmured to the exhausted animal, "just a little further." Abigail watched the stranger dismount with obvious pain. Even from the porch, she could see he was in trouble. Though her father had warned her countless times about the dangers of helping strangers in a town where the law was still finding its footing, something about this man's dignity in suffering moved her. "You need a doctor, mister," she called, setting her broom aside and descending the 3 wooden steps to the street. Vincent looked up, his vision blurring at the edges. The young woman before him came into focus, slowly, auburn hair neatly pinned back, a simple blue dress covered by a shopkeeper's apron, and eyes that held no fear despite the blood on his clothing. "No doctors," he managed. "Just water for my horse and maybe some supplies." Abigail assessed the situation quickly. "Your horse needs water and grain, you need bandages and rest. My father owns this store. He's away in Oklahoma City for supplies, but I can help you." Vincent wanted to refuse, but the world tilted dangerously. "I can pay," he insisted, reaching for his saddlebag. "We'll discuss payment after you're not bleeding all over our street," Abigail replied firmly, stepping forward to steady him as he swayed. "The stable's around back. Can you walk that far?" Pride almost made Vincent refuse her help, but practicality won out. "Lead the way, miss." "Abigail Mills," she offered. "And you are Vincent Blackburn," he admitted after a pause. "Most folks call me Vince." Behind the general store, a small stable housed the Mills family's wagon, horse, and mule. Abigail quickly cleared space for Saul, helping Vincent unsaddle the exhausted animal before turning her attention to the cowboy himself. "There's a room above the store where our stockboy sleeps when we have one. It's empty now. You can rest there while I fetch what you need." Vincent nodded, following her through the back entrance of the store and up a narrow staircase. The room was simple but clean: a single bed, a washstand with basin and pitcher, a small table with a lamp. It was more comfort than he'd known in weeks. "I'll bring water and bandages," Abigail said, "and something to eat. You look half-starved." "You're too kind, Miss Mills." "Abigail," she corrected, "and kindness costs nothing in a world that charges too much for everything else." As she disappeared down the stairs, Vincent sank onto the edge of the bed. The wound in his side, a parting gift from a man who'd accused him of cheating at cards in Fort Smith, had festered during his journey. He knew he should have sought a doctor days ago, but doctors asked questions, and questions led to trouble. Abigail returned with surprising efficiency, carrying a tray loaded with a basin of hot water, clean cloths, a bottle of whiskey, and what appeared to be her mother's sewing kit. "That needs cleaning and stitching," she said matter-of-factly, nodding toward his blood-soaked shirt. "I've done it before for my father and brother." "Where's your brother now?" Vincent asked, trying to distract himself as he painfully removed his shirt. Abigail's face tightened momentarily. "He died at Wounded Knee 2 years ago this December." Vincent fell silent. The massacre at Wounded Knee had been a bloody affair, soldiers of the 7th Cavalry gunning down hundreds of Lakota men, women, and children. He hadn't realized there'd been casualties among the soldiers as well. "I'm sorry," he offered quietly. "As am I," she replied, her voice steady as she began cleaning his wound. "This is deep, Mr. Blackburn." "Vince," he corrected with a grimace as the whiskey-soaked cloth touched raw flesh. This will hurt, she warned, threading a needle, but infection will hurt worse. He nodded, bracing himself. As she worked, he studied her face, the concentration in her eyes, the firm set of her jaw. She was beautiful in the way of frontier women, practical and unadorned, with strength running deeper than any cosmetic charm. "You're good at this," he observed through gritted teeth. "Necessity teaches many skills," she replied. "Hold still, I'm almost done." When she finished, Vince was pale but bandaged, the wound cleaned and stitched. Abigail poured him a cup of water, then added another splash of whiskey. "Drink this, then rest. I need to mind the store, but I'll bring you something to eat later." "I'm in your debt," he said quietly. "Rest now. Debts can wait." As Abigail descended the stairs, she wondered what trouble followed Vincent Blackburn. Men didn't ride into town bleeding without reason. The responsible thing would be to inform Sheriff Donovan, but something held her back. Perhaps it was the haunted look in Vincent's eyes, or perhaps it was simply that in the 2 years since her brother's death, the store had felt too quiet, too empty. The afternoon passed with a steady stream of customers, farmers needing supplies, women purchasing fabric and notions, cowboys buying tobacco and ammunition. Abigail handled them all with practiced efficiency, all while keeping an ear tuned to any movement from upstairs. As evening approached, she prepared a tray with stew, bread, and coffee. Her father wouldn't return for another 3 days, and she decided she would deal with explaining their guest when the time came. Upstairs, she found Vincent awake, looking marginally better though still weak. "You should be sleeping," she admonished, setting the tray on the small table. "Been sleeping too much," he replied. "Makes a man careless." Abigail studied him. "What are you running from, Mr. Blackburn?" "What makes you think I'm running?" "Experience," she said simply. "This town sees many men passing through. Some are heading toward something. Others are running away. You have the look of the latter." Vincent managed a pained smile. "Observant. Necessary in my position," she countered. "So," he sighed, accepting the bowl of stew she offered. "It's a long story involving a card game, an accusation of cheating, and a man who's now missing 3 fingers." "You're doing," he drew first. Vincent said simply. Abigail nodded. Violence was the language of the territories, a dialect she understood even if she didn't speak it herself. "And now his friends are hunting you, him and his brother both. They're not men who forgive easily. Few are out here." She watched him eat with the controlled hunger of someone accustomed to rationing. "The sheriff patrols at 7. You should stay out of sight." "Planning to turn me in, Miss Mills?" "If I was, I wouldn't have wasted good thread on those stitches," she replied with surprising sharpness. "But there's no sense in inviting questions before you're well enough to answer them." Vincent studied her, finding nothing but pragmatic concern in her expression. "Why help me?" Abigail was quiet for a moment. "Because my brother would have," she finally said. "Matthew believed in giving people chances." She stood, smoothing her apron. "Finish your food. I'll check your bandages in the morning." For 3 days, Vincent recovered in the room above the store while Abigail tended to her business below. She changed his bandages twice daily, brought him food, and even provided fresh clothing, shirts and trousers left behind by her brother that she'd never been able to part with. They spoke little, but in those moments, Vincent found himself increasingly drawn to her quiet strength and unassuming kindness. On the morning of the 4th day, he made his way downstairs for the first time, finding Abigail alone in the store, updating the ledger. "You should be resting," she said without looking up, somehow sensing his presence. "I've imposed enough," Vincent replied, making his way carefully to the counter. "Your father will be returning soon, I expect." "Today, likely," she confirmed, finally meeting his eyes. The color had returned to his face, and though he moved carefully, the fever was gone from his eyes. "You're looking better. Thanks to you." He placed a small stack of coins on the counter. "For the supplies and lodging." Abigail looked at the money, then back at him. "That's too much." "It's not nearly enough," Vincent insisted, "but it's what I can give." Their eyes held for a long moment before she nodded, accepting the payment. "What will you do now?" "Move on," he said simply. "Those men are still looking for me. No sense bringing trouble to your door." A shadow crossed her face. "When will you leave?" "Today, as soon as I've seen to Saul." She nodded again, her expression carefully neutral. "I'll pack some provisions for your journey." Vincent wanted to say more to express the gratitude and admiration that had grown over the past days, but the jingling of the door's bell interrupted them. A tall, bearded man entered, his face breaking into a smile at the sight of Abigail. "There's my girl." He engulfed her in a hug before turning curious eyes to Vincent. "And who might this be?" "Father, this is Mr. Vincent Blackburn," Abigail said smoothly. "He's been purchasing supplies for his journey north." Vincent extended his hand to George Mills, impressed by Abigail's quick thinking. "Sir, your daughter runs a fine establishment in your absence." "That she does," George agreed proudly, shaking Vincent's hand. "Heading to Kansas, are you?" "Eventually," Vincent hedged. "Just passing through for now," George nodded, seeming to accept this. "Well, any friend of my daughter's is welcome here. Will you join us for supper before you ride out?" Vincent glanced at Abigail, who gave a small nod. "I'd be honored, sir, thank you." As George carried his traveling bags to the family's living quarters behind the store, Abigail turned to Vincent. "He doesn't need to know about your wound," she said quietly, "or why you're really leaving." "I understand," he hesitated. "Abigail, I don't," she interrupted softly. "You've been honest about what you can and cannot offer. I respect that." She moved toward the back room, then paused. "Supper's at 6. Don't be late." That evening, seated at the Mills dining table, Vincent found himself drawn into conversation with George about the changing landscape of the territories. Oklahoma had only been opened to white settlement that spring during the land run, and Guthrie had transformed virtually overnight from open prairie to a bustling town of 10,000. "It's a new world coming," George said, passing a plate of biscuits. "Railroads expanding, telegraph lines going up everywhere. Won't be long before this is all civilized." "Some would say that's progress," Vincent commented. "And some would say it's a shame," Abigail countered quietly. "The land belonged to others first," George sighed. "My daughter has strong opinions about the government's treatment of the native tribes. Her brother's experience at Wounded Knee only strengthened those views." Vincent nodded. "I've traveled through Indian territory. There's truth in what she says." "Truth doesn't always build towns or bring prosperity," George replied, though without rancor. "But enough of politics. Vince, what line of work are you in when you're not traveling?" Vincent smiled faintly. "I've tried my hand at many things, sir. Cattle driving, horse breaking, some mining in Colorado, nothing that stuck." "A man of varied talents," George observed. "Any family?" "None living, sir." Abigail looked up at this, her eyes meeting Vincent's across the table. It was the first personal detail he'd shared beyond his immediate circumstances. "Well, family's what matters in the end," George said. "Everything else is just details." He glanced fondly at his daughter. "Abigail here has had her share of suitors, but none good enough, it seems." "Father," Abigail protested, color rising in her cheeks. "Just stating facts, daughter. A woman needs a partner in this world, especially out here." Vincent watched the interplay with interest. "I think Miss Mills seems perfectly capable on her own." Not many would have managed a store single-handedly while tending to, he caught himself, to customers as effectively. Abigail's eyes widened slightly at his near slip, but she recovered quickly. "Thank you, Mr. Blackburn. I appreciate that assessment." After dinner, as George retired to his pipe and newspaper, Abigail led Vincent to the porch. The evening was cool, stars emerging in the darkening sky above Guthrie's growing skyline. "You nearly gave me away," she said, though without anger. "Sorry about that," he replied. "Your father seems a good man." "He is, just old-fashioned about certain things." She leaned against the porch railing. "When do you really plan to leave, Dawn?" Vincent admitted. "Best to move while the town's still quiet," Abigail nodded, looking out across the dusty Main Street. "Where will you go?" "North for a while, maybe Dakota Territory, somewhere those men won't follow." "Is that the life you want?" she asked softly. "Always moving, always looking over your shoulder." Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "It's the life I've made," he finally said. "Not sure what else I'd do." "You could stay," she suggested, her voice barely audible. "Guthrie's growing. They need men who can work with horses. My father mentioned the liveries looking for help." The offer hung between them, fragile as spider silk. Vincent felt something twist inside him, a longing for roots, for connection, for the simple comfort of belonging somewhere. Abigail, he began carefully, I'm not the kind of man your father would want for you. I've done things I'm not proud of, I can't give you much. She turned to face him, moonlight silvering her features. Then you've already given enough, she said with a small smile. Vincent stared at her, stunned by her response. What do you mean, you've been honest? That's rare enough to be precious. She stepped closer. I'm not asking for promises or possessions, Vincent. I'm just suggesting that running isn't your only option. Before he could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 3 riders appeared at the end of the street, moving slowly, purposefully. Get inside, Vincent said urgently, recognizing the silhouette of the lead rider even in the dim light. Now, Abigail hesitated. Who are they? The men I told you about. Please go inside. She shook her head. This is my home. I won't be chased from it. Before Vincent could argue further, the riders stopped in front of the store. The leader, a burly man with a prominent mustache and a bandaged hand, dismounted. Well, well, he called. If it ain't the card cheat himself. Thought you'd hide out here in this dirt-heap town, did you? Vincent stepped forward, placing himself between the men and Abigail. This doesn't involve these people, Harlow. Your quarrels with me, Harlow spat, should have finished you in Fort Smith. Won't make that mistake twice. What seems to be the trouble here? George Mills appeared in the doorway, his shotgun held casually but visibly. No trouble that concerns you, old man, Harlow replied. Just come for what's owed me. You're on my property, George said evenly. That makes it my concern. Now state your business properly or move along. Harlow's companions shifted uneasily. One leaned forward to whisper something, but Harlow waved him off. This man, he pointed at Vincent, cheated me at cards and took my money, then cut off 3 of my fingers when I called him on it. Vincent's jaw tightened. You drew first, Harlow. And I won that money fair. You were too drunk to play well, that's all. Father, Abigail said quietly, Mr. Blackburn has been nothing but respectful during his stay with us. These men, on the other hand, arrived armed and making threats. George assessed the situation, his experienced eyes taking in the guns visible on each rider. Seems to me this is a matter for the sheriff. We don't need no law, Harlow growled. Just give us Blackburn and we'll be on our way. That won't be happening, George replied firmly. Now you boys can either wait for Sheriff Donovan, who'll be making his rounds shortly, or you can move on. Those are your choices. Vincent tensed, ready for violence, but to his surprise, Harlow seemed to reconsider. After a tense moment, he spat again. This ain't over, Blackburn. Not by a long shot. He remounted his horse. We'll be watching. As the 3 riders retreated down the street, Vincent exhaled slowly, turning to face George. Sir, I inside, George interrupted. All of us, now. Once they were seated in the living room, George fixed Vincent with a hard stare. I think you'd better tell me exactly who you are and what kind of trouble you've brought to my door. For the next hour, Vincent explained everything: the card game in Fort Smith, Harlow's accusation, the fight that followed, and his flight across the territory with the Larson brothers in pursuit. He told of his injury and how Abigail had taken him in, tended his wound, and kept his presence quiet. When he finished, George was silent for a long moment. So my daughter harbored a fugitive in my absence, he finally said, his voice carefully controlled. Father, he needed help, Abigail defended, and he's not running from the law just from men seeking vengeance. Vengeance has a way of being blind to who gets caught in its path, George replied sharply. You put yourself at risk, Abigail, and our business. I'm sorry for that, sir, Vincent said. I'll be gone by morning, you have my word. George studied him. And where will you go? Those men made it clear they intend to follow. Far enough that they'll give up the chase eventually, Vincent replied, though without much conviction. And if they don't, if they return here thinking you might come back, Vincent hadn't considered that. The thought of Harlow returning to harass the Mills family turned his stomach. I'll make sure they know I've moved on permanently. How exactly do you plan to do that? George challenged. Father, Abigail interrupted, what if Mr. Blackburn didn't have to leave? Both men turned to her in surprise. What are you suggesting? George asked. Abigail straightened her shoulders. Sheriff Donovan has been asking for deputies. The town's growing too fast for him to manage alone. If Mr. Blackburn were to take such a position, he'd have the law on his side when dealing with men like Harlow. Vincent stared at her. Abigail, I'm not a lawman, she finished. Perhaps not yet, but you're honest and you understand the kind of men who cause trouble. Those are valuable qualities, George frowned thoughtfully. Donovan did mention needing help, he admitted, and having the law's authority might indeed change how those men approach you. He looked at Vincent. Can you handle a gun? Yes, sir. And you've faced down trouble before without running to it, Vincent nodded. I don't look for fights, but I don't back down when they're necessary. George seemed to come to a decision. I'll speak to Donovan in the morning. If and only if he agrees, you might have a chance to settle this properly. He stood. Until then, you'll stay here where I can keep an eye on you. And Abigail, yes, father, no more secret patients in the storeroom. Is that understood? Yes, father, she agreed, though Vincent noted she didn't look particularly repentant. After George retired for the night, Vincent and Abigail sat in silence for several minutes. Why would you do that? Vincent finally asked. Suggest I become a deputy after everything I've told you. Abigail met his gaze steadily. Because I believe you're a good man who's been surviving in a world that doesn't reward goodness, and because, she hesitated, I'm not ready for you to leave. The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Vincent felt something shift inside him, a wall beginning to crumble. I can't promise anything, Abigail. Even if Donovan agrees, there's no guarantee Harlow will back down. I'm not asking for guarantees, she replied. Just a chance. In the quiet of the room, with moonlight streaming through the window, Vincent reached for her hand. It was small but strong in his calloused grip. Then I'll try, he said simply, for that chance. Morning brought Sheriff Donovan to the Mills store, a gruff, competent man with graying temples and shrewd eyes. He listened to George's proposal, assessed Vincent with experienced scrutiny, and asked pointed questions about his background and capabilities. A deputy needs to be trusted, Donovan said bluntly. This town's growing faster than its morals. I need men who won't be tempted by bribes or intimidated by threats. I understand, sir, Vincent replied. Do you? Because from what I gather, you've spent most of your life avoiding attachments to places or people. A lawman needs roots, Blackburn. He needs to care about the community he's protecting. Vincent glanced at Abigail, who watched from behind the counter. Perhaps it's time I found those roots, Sheriff. Donovan followed his gaze, a knowing look crossing his weathered features. I see. He turned back to Vincent. 3-month trial. You'll get room and board at the jailhouse plus $2 a day. If you work out, we'll make it permanent. If not, you move on with no hard feelings. Fair? More than fair, Vincent agreed, extending his hand. As for those men who were looking for you, if they return, they'll be dealing with the law, not just a drifter. That changes things. Yes, sir. Report to the jailhouse at noon. We'll get you sworn in proper. Donovan nodded to George and Abigail. Madam, George. With that, he departed, leaving a changed atmosphere behind him. George clapped Vincent on the shoulder. Well, Deputy Blackburn, seems you found yourself a position. I suggest you use it wisely. I intend to, sir. Thank you for your help. Wasn't entirely for your benefit, George replied candidly. Those men threatened my family and my business. I protect what's mine. He glanced meaningfully between Vincent and his daughter before heading to the storeroom, leaving them alone. Abigail moved from behind the counter, her eyes bright with something Vincent couldn't quite name. Deputy Blackburn, she said, testing the title. It suits you. Does it? He asked uncertainly. I've never been one to enforce rules. Perhaps not, she agreed. But you understand justice, which is more important, she hesitated. Will you stay then? Really stay? Vincent looked around the store, out the window to Guthrie's dusty Main Street, and finally back to Abigail's hopeful face. For the first time in years, he felt something like peace settle over him. Yes, he said, I'll stay. For how long? She pressed, needing the certainty. Vincent smiled, reaching for her hand. For as long as you'll have me. The next 3 months transformed Vincent's life in ways he could never have imagined. As Deputy Blackburn, he patrolled Guthrie's growing streets, broke up fights at the saloons, protected merchants from thieves, and gradually earned the respect of the townspeople. Sheriff Donovan proved to be a fair mentor, teaching Vincent the finer points of law enforcement while respecting his natural instincts for handling trouble. True to Donovan's prediction, Harlow and his brother returned 2 weeks into Vincent's new position. The confrontation happened in broad daylight on Main Street, with Harlow clearly surprised to find his quarry wearing a deputy's badge. "This some kind of joke?" he demanded when Vincent stepped out of the sheriff's office to meet them. "You think a tin star changes anything between us?" "It changes everything," Vincent replied calmly, though his hand rested near his holster. "This is a law-abiding town, Harlow. You're welcome to pass through, but if you're looking for trouble, you'll find more than you bargained for." Harlow's brother leaned over to whisper something, clearly uneasy about confronting a lawman. The territorial judges were notoriously harsh on those who interfered with peace officers. "This ain't over," Harlow finally growled, echoing his previous threat. "Actually, it is," Sheriff Donovan said, emerging from the jailhouse with his shotgun. "My deputy has given you a fair warning. Heed it or spend the night in our cells before seeing the judge tomorrow. Your choice." Faced with the law's authority and the gathering crowd of onlookers, Harlow backed down. By sundown, the Larson brothers had left Guthrie, reportedly heading south toward Texas. The incident cemented Vincent's position in the community. Having stood his ground without violence, he demonstrated the kind of measured authority Guthrie needed in its formative days. Throughout those months, his relationship with Abigail deepened. They began with chaperoned walks after Sunday services, progressed to shared suppers at the Mills home, and eventually, with George's cautious blessing, more private moments where they spoke of dreams and possibilities. "I never thought I'd wear a badge," Vincent admitted one evening as they sat on the store's porch. "Always saw lawmen as obstacles, not allies." Abigail smiled. "Life has a way of changing our perspectives." She hesitated. "Are you happy here, Vincent?" "Truly," he considered the question seriously. "I am. For the first time in years, I'm not looking over my shoulder or planning my next escape. I wake up with purpose." He took her hand. "And something to look forward to." Their courtship progressed with the steady pace of people who understood that lasting foundations aren't built in haste. George Mills observed their growing attachment with a father's mixture of protection and pride. By the time Vincent's trial period ended and Donovan officially offered him a permanent position, George had taken to inviting the young deputy for Sunday dinners and seeking his opinion on store security. In late November, as Guthrie prepared for its first territorial Christmas, Vincent joined the Mills family for dinner, unusually quiet and formal in a newly purchased suit. After the meal, he asked George for a private word in his study, a converted back room lined with the few books the merchant had transported from his previous life in Missouri. "Sir," Vincent began once they were seated, "I want to ask for your permission to marry Abigail." George studied him, pipe in hand. "You've been a deputy for barely 3 months, son." "Yes, sir, but I've known my heart for longer than that." Vincent met the older man's eyes steadily. "I love your daughter. I want to build a life with her here in Guthrie." "And what do you have to offer her?" "A deputy's salary isn't much." "No, sir, it isn't," Vincent agreed. "I've been saving, but I can't give her the comforts she deserves, at least not right away." He leaned forward. "But I can promise to protect her, provide for her as best I can, and never give her cause to regret choosing me." George puffed thoughtfully on his pipe. "Abigail has never cared much for material comforts, takes after her mother that way." His eyes grew distant for a moment. "Sarah was content with very little as long as we faced it together." "That's all I'm asking for, sir." A chance to face life alongside Abigail. After a long silence, George nodded. "You have my blessing, Vincent, but I suggest you make sure my daughter is of the same mind before you start planning too far ahead." Vincent smiled. "Thank you, sir. I intend to ask her properly." The opportunity came the following evening. Vincent had arranged with George to close the store early, allowing him to escort Abigail to the newly constructed gazebo in Guthrie's central square. Christmas decorations adorned the surrounding buildings, and a light dusting of snow rare for Oklahoma territory had fallen that morning, lending the scene a magical quality. "It's beautiful," Abigail said as they approached the gazebo. "I've never seen the square looking so festive." "The town's coming together," Vincent agreed. "People are putting down roots." "Including you," she observed with a smile. Sheriff Donovan says you're the best deputy he's ever had. High praise considering I'm the only deputy he's ever had, Vincent laughed, leading her up the gazebo steps. Once inside the shelter, he turned to face her, suddenly serious. Abigail, when I rode into Guthrie, I was a man with nowhere to go and nothing to offer. You gave me shelter when I needed it, healing when I was wounded, and purpose when I was lost. Abigail's eyes widened as she realized where this conversation was heading. Vincent, he took her gloved hands in his. I told you once that I couldn't give you much. Your response changed my life. You said I'd already given enough. He knelt before her, drawing a simple gold band from his pocket. I still don't have wealth or property to offer, but I have my heart, my name, and my promise to stand beside you for all our days. Would that be enough? Will you marry me? Tears glistened in Abigail's eyes, reflecting the lantern light. It's more than enough, she whispered. Yes, Vincent Blackburn, I will marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to embrace her, snow began to fall again, dusting their shoulders and hair with delicate crystals. It's a blessing, Abigail murmured against his chest. Mother always said snow at Christmas was a sign of good fortune to come. Vincent held her close, marveling at how a man with nothing had somehow found everything. I already have all the fortune I need, he replied softly. They were married on New Year's Day, 1890, in Guthrie's newly completed church. The ceremony was simple, but well-attended. Sheriff Donovan stood as Vincent's best man, while Abigail was attended by Ruth Carson, her closest friend and the milliner's daughter. George Mills gave his daughter away with dignified pride, though those who knew him well noticed the moisture in his eyes as he placed her hand in Vincent's. The reception was held at the general store, transformed for the occasion with ribbons, flowers, and tables laden with food contributed by half the town. As the territorial governor's wife had recently declared, Guthrie may be young, but we know how to celebrate properly. As evening fell and the last guests departed, Vincent and Abigail stood on the porch of their new home, a modest cabin on the edge of town that Vincent had been secretly repairing in his spare hours. It's not much, he said, echoing his words from months before, but it's ours. Abigail leaned against him, her wedding ring catching the light of the setting sun. Then it's everything, she replied. We'll build the rest together, and build they did. Over the next 2 years, Vincent continued as Guthrie's deputy, while Abigail divided her time between helping her father at the store and making their cabin into a home. The town grew around them, transforming from a hasty settlement to a proper city with governance, commerce, and community. In the spring of 1892, Vincent received an unexpected offer. Sheriff Donovan, aging and increasingly troubled by rheumatism, proposed that Vincent consider taking over his position. Town council's agreeable, Donovan explained as they shared coffee in the jailhouse. You've proven yourself 10 times over and folks trust you. I'd stay on as an advisor for a spell, but the badge would be yours. Vincent was stunned. Sheriff, I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Donovan replied. Talk it over with your wife. Being sheriff means more responsibility, but also better pay and standing. Might be good timing, what with the baby coming and all. Vincent nearly spilled his coffee. How did you? Donovan chuckled. Small town, son. Mrs. Carson from the millinery saw Abigail ordering new fabric for baby clothes. Word travels. That evening, Vincent found Abigail in their garden, tending to the early vegetables that supplemented their table. The slight rounding of her figure confirmed what Donovan had implied, though she hadn't yet shared the news. You're home early, she observed, brushing soil from her hands as she rose to greet him. Vincent embraced her, then stepped back to look into her eyes. When were you going to tell me about the baby? Abigail's cheeks flushed. How did you? Donovan, he explained with a smile. Apparently Mrs. Carson has been sharing her observations. That woman, Abigail sighed, though without real irritation. I was waiting until I was certain. The doctor confirmed it yesterday. I was planning to tell you tonight. Her expression turned anxious. Are you happy about it? Vincent's answer was to lift her gently off her feet, spinning her in a circle before setting her down with a kiss. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, he assured her. I'm going to be a father. We're going to be parents. Her face relaxed into joy. We are, in about 6 months, according to doctor. Wilson, Vincent took her hand, leading her to the bench beneath their young apple tree. Donovan offered me his job today, he said once they were seated. He's ready to retire and the council has approved me as his replacement. Sheriff Blackburn, Abigail tested the title. It has a fine sound to it. It would mean more responsibility, he cautioned. But also better pay, especially with the baby coming. She squeezed his hand. You should accept it. You've earned this, Vincent. Are you sure? Being the sheriff's wife comes with its own challenges. Abigail smiled. I've been facing challenges alongside you since the day you rode into town bleeding. I don't intend to stop now. Vincent marveled at her strength and confidence. How did I get so lucky? You weren't the only one, she replied softly. When a wounded cowboy told me he couldn't give me much, I already knew he'd given me what mattered most: honesty, respect, and a heart that matched my own. In October of 1892, two significant events marked the Blackburn family history. Vincent was officially sworn in as sheriff of Guthrie, and 2 weeks later, Abigail gave birth to twins, a boy they named Matthew after her brother, and a girl they called Sarah for her mother. Standing by the window of their bedroom, holding his newborn son while Abigail nursed their daughter, Vincent reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. From a drifter with nothing but troubles at his back to a husband, father, and community leader, all because a compassionate woman had seen beyond his circumstances to the man he could become. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" Abigail asked, her voice tired but content. Vincent returned to the bedside, carefully placing Matthew in the cradle beside her before sitting on the edge of the mattress. "About how everything changed the day I rode into Guthrie," he admitted. "About how you saved me in more ways than just tending my wound." She smiled, shifting little Sarah to her shoulder to gently pat her back. "We saved each other, I think. After Matthew died, I wasn't sure I'd ever feel purpose again. Then you arrived, needing help I could give." Vincent reached out to stroke his daughter's downy head. "I told you once I couldn't give you much," he remembered. "You said I'd already given enough. I didn't understand then what you meant." "And now," she asked, her eyes soft with love, "now I understand that what matters isn't what we possess, but who we become together." He leaned forward to kiss her gently. "And together, we've become everything I never dared to dream of." As winter settled over Guthrie, the Blackburn home stood warm against the cold, a sanctuary built not from wealth or privilege, but from the stronger foundations of love, trust, and shared purpose. Within its walls, a family grew, testament to the truth that the richest gifts often come with the simple words, "I can't give you much," answered by a heart that knows, "then you've already given enough."